Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. I apologize for not having streamed yesterday. I kind of got my timing wrong. I thought I would have time to react to the AMD stream. Then I saw that it was much later than I thought it would be, but also way too early in, like, basically tonight for me to stream today. So I'm streaming retrospectively. And then I thought, well, maybe I should wait until Intel had its stream so I could live stream that. But that is also happening basically next night. And no chance I'm streaming it 4 or 5 a.m. So yeah, here I am. I'm having a very interesting discussion today. I think most people who are watching this channel, especially those who are highly engaged with it, are very interested in like what I dub the CPU wars or the SoC wars. I know there's a lot of like AI wars going on and stuff like that, but we do have a lot of competition right now in the CPU space. For a while, it was basically Intel. And then we had ARM mobile chips, but those were really mobile. This was even before the days of the X variants, right, for iPads. And we had AMD lagging behind with shit like Bulldozer. And then over time, AMD became more competitive. Apple expanded the A series to the AX series, eventually to the M series, eventually to the M Pro, M Max, and M Ultra chips. Now Qualcomm is expanding their Snapdragon chips too. Well, they've had like their 8GC or whatever, some bullshit name for like their higher end tablets and laptops, but now it's the Snapdragon X Elite. Believe me, guys, I know that name now because we've been talking about this freaking chip for basically the cycle of like a human being born. It's been like 9 months since they introduced the Snapdragon X Elite, and we still don't have devices on the shelf with it. But it's all coming to somewhat of a close because right now we do have Computex in Taiwan. It's basically one of the biggest tech meetings, gatherings there is, especially for like the PCMR crowd. And we have gotten new chips from AMD. We have gotten more data, sort of. It's still not quite the data I would want for like an actual in-depth breakdown, but we have gotten more info on the Snapdragon X Plus and X Elite chips. And tomorrow, or depending on when you're watching this, Intel will also be presenting their latest chips, which will be like their Arrow Lake and Lunar Lake families. I have no idea which ones concretely and which exact chips we are getting, but probably Lunar Lake, as far as I understand, it will be the focus because Lunar Lake supposedly is coming out in Q3 of this year, and then Arrow Lake, which is more like their desktop parts, is coming out in Q4. So we have some stuff to go through if we're gonna analyze all that stuff. Now, I cannot stream as long for today as I would like to. This week is actually very, very busy. I'm trying to get some stuff done so I have more time next week during DubDub, because obviously this is something that I want to live stream the actual keynote. I want to have a video at least the next day, hopefully like in the next 12, 18 hours after my first DubDub stream. And I would want to have basically daily content after WWDC, especially as I look forward to like installing all the betas myself, you know, all the developer bullshit. It's actually going to be fun. I'm not going to be live streaming other events from DubDub, but we are going to take more info as like they have like separate smaller presentations around developer APIs, maybe some smaller updates that they didn't mention during the actual keynote, basically things like that. So I would want to cover that on and on and on until it's all dried out and milked everything out of DubDub that I could. And this is why this week will not be quite as active, probably, as I would kind of like it to be, given that we do have some interesting stuff to talk about. Well, why am I talking about DubDub? Well, for one, I do want you guys to tune in next week, but also very importantly, we are getting some sort of last minute confirmations, not just of stuff that we are going to get at WWDC, but also about things that we're supposedly not getting at Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, and which it's sort of hit and miss when we actually get hardware dub-dubs, but it seems like this year might be the first one since 2021. Uh, I find it funny when people write stuff like that, because that basically leaves 2022 and 2023. Yeah, we got hardware. But yeah, basically this will be a dub-dub in a while, if you want to define it that way, that will supposedly not have any new hardware. No new Macs, no M4 based Macs, no M4 Pro chips, M4 Max chips, Ultra chips, regardless of what Vadim Yuriev from MaxTech might be speculating. I know he has been right on the M4, but he has been wrong on multiple other things, such as his prediction that M3 Ultra will be supposedly a brand new die that is like 50% larger than M3 Max, and then Apple will use that new die to create an M3 Extreme, which is two new M3 Ultras combined. But most likely what we will be seeing is basically Apple just following the route that we've already seen during M1 and M2, which is Apple will have M4 Pro, M4 Max chips, and then two M4 Max chips will make an M4 Ultra. That's the most likely thing that we're going to see right now with the rollout. But this rollout will not be happening at DubDub. We are getting iOS 18, a lot of AI features. We're also getting the first major new version of Vision OS. And of course, macOS, tvOS, watchOS. Apple has quite a broad portfolio this year. These days, I guess it's not just this year, where they have to update a lot, kind of simultaneously. So DubDub will have a lot. I kind of assume it's going to be a full 2-hour presentation, maybe a little above that. And I just wanted to say that, yeah, according to like the latest leaks and rumors, we are not getting new hardware. This would have potentially included stuff like new Macs, maybe like an iPad mini, but yeah, apparently none of that is happening. What we could be looking forward to, though, is Vision Pro potentially being announced for new regions. So we recently had like a smaller leak where we saw like other countries where Vision Pro is supposedly coming to, and maybe this will get announced at DubDub this year. Maybe they will just talk about Vision OS 2.0, introduce the latest feature, have some developers that show off their latest versions, their latest apps and games for Vision Pro, and then they will just say, okay guys, this is Vision OS 2, this is the latest stuff for Vision Pro. Oh, and by the way, Vision Pro is launching in like a lot of European countries, China, a lot of our other major markets. And I think Apple can then write basically that release for another year, make sure that more developers in more parts of the world get their hands on Vision Pro. And then we should be looking at maybe Vision Pro 2 at like early 2026. That's my personal prediction. I know some people disagree with that, but like around DubDub 2026, I would definitely expect to get one. I would like to see one way sooner with like an M4 processor, but we haven't gotten any confirmation on that level. So I hope it happens rather sooner than later. Not because I believe like an M2 chip is garbage, but I would definitely like to have newer and better capabilities inside Vision Pro. So this is probably the only hardware we are getting. There was some discussion about us potentially getting like something related to tvOS, maybe like a HomePod with a screen or something like that, but apparently none of this is happening. Again, it cannot be confirmed, but we'll see at DubDub, which is like basically now, exactly a week from now. So I once again try to implore you, if you're enjoying this channel, please subscribe to it so you actually like see my other content, hit the notification bell so you actually know when I'm going live. I know this helps a lot. I know most subscribers have not done so. Please leave a like. That helps tremendously with the algorithm and help finding new people, especially new people that are willing to watch live. Please comment. Let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with. Obviously, do that live in the live chat, or do that once the video has already been uploaded. It all helps. Subscribing, obviously, that's kind of the creme de la creme of support you can give to a YouTuber. And if you want to support this channel really, really directly, you can leave a super chat, you can leave a super sticker right while I'm live, or if you want to support this channel basically in the long term, subscribe to my Patreon. Link is in the description below. So I've basically outlined that for now we are not seeing new hardware from Apple. However, as I've alluded to in my initial introduction to this video, basically, that does not mean there's not new hardware to talk about. Because at first, what we should start out with is AMD did not just announce like new like laptop competitors for Apple. Obviously, they had like their partners like Dell, HP, Lenovo on stage. They had like Microsoft executives and stuff like that. But primarily, what Microsoft showed, what AMD showed off yesterday was Zen 5, their next version of Ryzen 9000 to be more precise. And this is what is powering both their latest desktop chips, the Ryzen 9000 chips, and their latest laptop chips, which they've stupidly, mind-bogglingly called Ryzen AI 300 series. This is one of the most like brain disease names that I've ever seen for a product, and I've seen the new iPad. Like, this is so monumentally freaking garbage of a name. I have no idea. Like, I know why they called it that. It's because they think anything with AI in the title will basically sell, which is stupid. That's not how anything works. But like now they have like chips that are called like for one, it's Ryzen and AI. So similar to how we would say Ryzen 9000 series, we cannot say Ryzen 300 series. We have to say Ryzen AI 300 series, because assuming next year we're probably getting like a Ryzen AI 400 series. The 3 in the 300 series basically stands for this being their third NPU that they integrate into their chips, right? NPU, for anybody who follows more Apple stuff, Apple calls it a neural engine, an Apple neural engine to be more precise. This is their AI accelerators that they have in A and M series processors. And this is what basically AMD is trying to allude to, which most people don't even understand and won't. They will just think, oh, did I miss the 200 and 100 series? The 200 and 100 series are the Ryzen 8840 processors, that's the 200 series, and then the 7840 series, which would be like their comparable like Hawk Point, and I don't even know which one was Phoenix. It's gotten all so confusing. Basically, this is Strix Point. It's Ryzen A 300, and it's based on a combination of Zen 5 also being the architecture powering their Ryzen 9000 desktop chips, and it's also a combination of their latest AI accelerators, which they say is based on XDNA2 and NPU, and it's a combination of their GPU, which is based on RDNA 3.5. RDNA 3000, RDNA 3 obviously being available as like desktop GPUs, and like older generations of that. Some of you might know, for example, from powering like the consoles, RDNA 2. RDNA 4 is coming at the very end of this year, most likely, and the PlayStation 5 will like have a mix between like 3.5, RDNA 4, the PlayStation 5 Pro. So yeah, we should know AMD at least a little. Even if you're like an Apple fanboy or whatever, I still always encourage people to like learn about what is on the market. Because even if you will probably never consider like a Windows laptop, that still doesn't mean that you could like use that understanding to like improve your appreciation of like the features you might want to have, right? It might improve like your willingness to like wait for another price point so that your MacBook might be more price competitive to a Windows laptop that just came out. So I always like believe more knowledge is better, and this is why we are gonna fight through this. By the way, guys, I've already encouraged you to do all the YouTube jazz, as I call it. I would still like to encourage you to do one specific thing, though. Please, if you are in the comments, if you are in the live chat, let me know if the audio and video quality is working all right for you. You guys know I'm very, very paranoid about that. And as always, let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with, and if you have any suggestions for what else I should be covering, not just today, but over the next couple of days as we get like Intel's presentation at Computex. Maybe there's like a new tech video I should be reacting to. I really, really love engaging with the live chat. I love engaging with your opinions, with your controversial stuff. So let me know. So, Ryzen 9000 or Zen 5. Now, those are like Zen 5 is obviously an architecture. That means it exists basically as a core design. In fact, it exists as several core design, most noticeably as Zen 5, the regular one, basically, the one that we will see in most products, but also Zen 5C. Zen 5C is a smaller, more dense version of Zen 5. It has less cache, and it clocks worse than the regular Zen 5, but that also makes it a better choice, for example, for a laptop chip where, for one, you want to save cost by using a smaller die area. You might not even want to clock it at max speeds because, quite honestly, your thermals and your battery won't be able to handle it. So why waste money on like a full Zen 5 core if you can invest instead of a mix of Zen 5 and Zen 5C cores? And we'll get to that when we talk about the Ryzen AI 300 series. Now, on the desktop side, this is for now, we're only getting Zen 5, no Zen 5C, but also no 3D V-cache. Anybody of you who knows AMD for like a while, they've been building chips where basically on top of that, they graphed more cache. And that cache significantly improves instructions per clock because now you can fit a lot more work on one on like the actual chip, right, on one core or on several cores. Now it does come with some downsides like lower max clock speeds, but usually those are offset by a much better efficiency through the higher cache and higher IPC, especially for things such as gaming. So we are not getting that on the desktop yet. However, we are probably gonna see Ryzen like a Ryzen 9800X 3D, which would be like an 8-core version with 3D V-cache, probably till the end of the year, so it can better compete with Intel's upcoming Meteor Lake processors. So a lot of information, and I know a lot of people watching this are not that diehard into processors as I am. But basically, this is an improvement over Zen 4. Zen 4 was the Ryzen 7000 and to most degrees the Ryzen 8000 generation. The 8000 was just the mobile parts. It still comes in 4 variants, at least for now. A 6-core version, which basically takes like an 8-core chip complex, and if some of those chips don't work because of yield issues, now you have 6. Or you have a full chiplet with 8 cores, now you got the 8-core version. 12 cores is basically 2 6-core chiplets, and 16 cores is when you combine 2 8-core chiplets. So very, very reasonable, very much part of for the course. We got the same lineup, basic lineup with the Ryzen 7000 series. We do not have pricing yet. However, we do have some more detailed explanations. For example, the clock speeds on the Ryzen 9950X, this will be the 16-core parts, are still supposed to be at max 5.7 gigahertz. So there's at least no clear advertised improvement in clock speeds. There might be some benefits to overclocking, because you can obviously overclock like AMD's chips, but at least it's not like built in by default. We do have small improvements in terms of TDP. Now, TDP does not actually represent one-to-one power consumption, but for example, on the 6 and 8 core parts, we have a very notable reduction in TDP, going down from 105 watts all the way down to 65 watts. Whether or not that actually means that those chips consume like 30-40% less fewer watts, I wouldn't bet on it, and it would make pretty much zero sense given the architecture, given the process node and stuff like that. But it is something we should look out for, right? We always talk about Apple's focus on efficiency, and we should be calling it out as a positive when there are some efficiency gains on other designs. Now, that does not mean we should take stuff like TDP, which is more like a rating for like thermals rather than actual wattage. It basically instructs people like what kind of cooler they should get with their latest chips. But there seems to be some efficiency gains. They haven't talked about it very much, but we'll see, right? It's all basically getting powered by a 15-16% IPC improvement. It's really, really hard to tell what the exact IPC improvement is for Zen 5, because a lot of Zen 5's improvements come through like more specific stuff, right? Like AVX 512. And if you actually look how they calculate IPC, for one, this is not like an average result for IPC. This is up to. So this is a little bit more pessimistic than we usually see them word stuff. However, what stands out here is, at least to me, is the use of 2 different Geekbench versions, right? And then using like specific tests inside them, and then you have like this huge uplift in like Geekbench 5.4 AES XTS, which I assume is like partially enhanced by AVX 512. I really cannot tell you. Regardless, it's one part of Geekbench 5 that got a lot better. Obviously, we are now way farther than Geekbench 5.4, but then we have like text processing, which is part of the Geekbench 6 suite, and that is 19% faster. So in order to gain a 16% IPC uplift, 2 of the tests that AMD had to include in that calculation were 2 different versions of Geekbench, and not even like the average result. Now, we do have some stuff like Puget tests for Adobe suite. We have Speedometer, we have Octane. Those are pretty decent tests, actually, and those represent that 15-16% number actually rather well. Also, what is going on with PC parts manufacturing using Cinebench R23? Like, do they believe that the Cinema 4D guys are just had a coconut dropped in their head and Cinebench 2024 doesn't matter? Like, what is going on with the people repeatedly refusing to use the latest version of Cinebench? I see that crap every single time. It's like, it just drives me insane. And then we have games, Far Cry 6 and League of Legends here. Very, very weird mix, I always have to say, when you don't have like an aggregate for like maybe 5 to 6 games at least. And then you would like just oppose it that to like a more productivity based benchmarks, but you just did like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. You have 13 tests. 2 of them are Geekbench. You have 2 games, which is LOL and Far Cry, and then you have 3D Mark Physics, which is not game, obviously, but it's like a gaming benchmark-ish. it's so weird to me, but yeah. So the Geomean versus Zen 4 is a 16% uplift, which is pretty much in line with the IPC uplifts we saw in prior generations. And as I said before, stuff like AVX 512 instruction sets will see higher gains than 16%. But what this is very different versus Zen 4 is that Zen 4 also came with like a gigahertz of extra clock speeds versus Zen 3. So it's like 13-14% IPC uplift was like helped by like a 10-15% uplift in clock speeds, sometimes more, sometimes like 18% higher clock speeds. So this is how it could in some tests give you like 30% more performance or something like that. This will not do so, except for like more specific stuff like AVX 512 derived stuff like VAES 512, right? All the beautiful letters and numbers combined. You will see stuff like that enhanced, and it will probably be pretty good for AI workloads, but this will not be like your that 35% number. Don't expect to see it in games and stuff, which of course is what really matters for like the PCMR crowd. But beyond that, there is a few things to still consider, right? So it's still part of the AM5 platform. So if you ever think about like the price to performance and value ratio of like Apple versus its competition, I do encourage you to look that on the PC side, you'll also have like a very strong longevity for stuff like motherboards, right? So especially on the AMD side, for example, now they're like on their third major version of just the chipset for AM5. So they do have like the X870 and X870E motherboard chipsets right now, that basically improves upon the older chipsets with like a lot of PCIe lanes, support for better memory. So it's all interesting, and there is value here, or at least I would be very much confirming that if I knew the pricing. Thank you, AMD, for not doing that. There is, however, one point I do want to cover, and that is what this is built on. Now, CCD stands for chip complex die, as far as I know. Unless this has changed, or I'm having a brain worm like RFK Jr. But basically, this is where you get like your primary CPU, very basically like the cores of the CPU, the main cores. And then you have an IO die, which is basically for stuff that regulates other shit, right? Like your PCIe lanes and whatever. And that is built on 6 nanometer. Now, if we look at the CCD, where obviously most of like where your logic is, your main cores, your cache and whatever, right? Going from Ryzen 5000, which is Zen 3, that was based on 7 nanometer, jumping to Ryzen 7000, which was Zen 4, and now we are at 5 nanometer. So this is very, very relevant. That's very much what you would expect as an intergenerational jump. This is the kind of jump, for example, that Apple did from like the A12 chip to the A14 chip, right? But now going from Ryzen 7000 to Ryzen 9000 to Granite Ridge and Zen 5, this is where, unfortunately, the node is really not much in our favor. Now, the IO die is still at 6 nanometer. That doesn't matter that much, because apparently once you hit like 7-8 nanometer or whatever, it becomes harder and harder to scale down stuff like memory controllers and even cache to a degree, but you still need cache right next to your logic, so you cannot really go way too cheap on your cache. But you can, for example, use a different node for the 3D cache that you can, as I said before, graft on top of your CPU cores. What hasn't seen a noticeable uplift, though, well, the IO die hasn't seen a noticeable uplift, but it kind of doesn't need it very much. But the CCD or CCDs when we are talking about like the 16 core version, stuff like that, that is on 4 nanometer. Now 4 nanometer, for one, they do say N4, which is interesting to me. They do not say N4P. I kind of would have expected it to be definitely on N4P, because why wouldn't it, right? At this point, like, if you are moving away from N5 and you are not adopting like N5P, which we know they aren't, why are you, like, I assume it's just to save money and to potentially like double down on the N4 orders they've already had for like their 7840 series, their 8840 series. So I cannot fully say if this might be N4P, but it seems like it's just N4, which obviously means that we do not get really big like efficiency jumps here. The chip doesn't get access to much higher clock speeds. This is why basically the improvements that we're seeing come basically 100% from the IPC changes. And yes, they do have improvements to branch prediction, and I do believe they have like a wider decode engine here, though they will have like a more detailed breakdown of the exact architecture, and you can then look forward, not like a dedicated video to me, but I will probably note it at some point when I talk again about like Zen 5 and stuff like that. So this is the one thing that is actually pretty universally disappointing about chips right now. Apple is on N3E, which is the second version of 3 nanometer. Now, it's not that much better technically than N3B, but it gives access to like better yields. It's supposedly cheaper, and it, judging from the N4, it also seems to maybe have like better clock speeds than N3B. But we're getting none of that because this is N4, and after 2 years after a Ryzen 7000, we are still on a 5 nanometer class node. And this is not just the case, unfortunately, for AMD. This also seems to be the case for NVIDIA's Blackwell chips, which for now will be coming for like cloud, but then also will have like their gaming counterparts and are most likely going to be based on the same die. But also Apple's biggest supposed ARM-based competitor, Qualcomm, with their Snapdragon X Elite and their Orion cores, is a 4 nanometer based chip. As far as I know, this one is N4P rather than regular N4. Feel free to correct me if you know precisely. So what I just found interesting here is that companies are trying to save money. Now, there are questions about like 3 nanometer availability. Maybe right now nobody but Apple could even build a 3 nanometer chip in terms of like N3E, because Apple got like all the N3B orders out of the way, and probably nobody but maybe Intel will use some like leftovers, will use N3B besides them. And then when it comes to N3E, everyone is planning to use N3E eventually, but for now Apple is like buying it up for their M4 chips. Maybe they're like reserving early like a lot of production right now for A18 chips and things like that. So I don't want to blame the company specifically, but it's kind of the truth of the matter that, like, regardless of what you want to say, if you want the chip with the latest node, you have to go with Apple. Again, you don't need to have the latest node. The jump from N4P to N3E is not as monumental as going from N7 to N5, but it's still a notable improvement, and it's not an improvement that you can leverage on the latest Ryzen chips or the latest Qualcomm chips. Now, when we talk again about the latest Ryzen chips, now specifically moving over from the desktop parts to the mobile parts, which are much more relevant competitors to Apple, there is like basically a new player in town in terms of naming. I've said that before, the Ryzen AI 300. And for now, we actually got two interesting versions. Now, what defines them is partially 50 trillion operations per second, part of XDNA 2 powered neural processing unit. Yes, I know I love PC abbreviations as well. So basically, if you actually compare that to Apple, Jesus Christ. Because this is what AMD has done during their presentation. They advertised their chip as having 50 TOPS. This is 8-bit compute, by the way. So this basically, I believe, is the first thing to confirm that Apple's latest A&E numbers are based on 8-bit and not on 16-bit. So thank you, AMD, for giving me a piece of data that I wasn't able to get directly from Apple. Then there is the Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite that is at 45 TOPS. If you actually look at it, there is like a line here at 40 TOPS. 40 TOPS is what Microsoft says is the minimum requirement for Copilot Plus experiences, which is basically their AI stuff that they use inside Windows 11, and supposedly that will be a huge part of like Windows 12 eventually. Now, Intel Lunar Lake is yet to be fully confirmed, so that's around 40 to 45 TOPS expected. Apple during the M4 presentation said it's at 38 TOPS. Now, Intel's current like Meteor-based chips, Meteor Lake chips, are basically garbage. This is like below A15 A&E stuff. So you get like 11 TOPS, and then like AMD's own 8040 series, that one is like 1/3 as fast as their newest one. So they definitely made a big leap forward in terms of neural engine compute. And what is interesting is this is pretty much all they wanted to talk about. Like, which is funny because they have improved several things, right? A new RDNA 3.5 based integrated graphics solution has 16 compute units versus 12. These new chips will have access to faster memory, so even with the same memory bus width, you would still get a theoretically higher memory bandwidth overall. But they all just wanted to talk about AI. That presentation, by the way, from AMD yesterday or today, it happened at like 4 a.m. my time. It was so monumentally boring. It was so excruciatingly painful to watch. Like just those boring execs from HP and whatever, and they come in and they shake hands with Lisa Su and they say like, look at our latest laptop. It was supposed to be like a dark secret, and then they show you a freaking laptop. Like, come on, guys. We are in 2024. You cannot really like surprise me with like a clamshell laptop, no matter how thin its bezels are or not, or whatever other feature you want to advertise for it. It's like, and also from like 50 meters away, it's not like I'll be able to tell how good its 3K OLED screen is or not. Like, if you have a good laptop, talk about it. Don't do that bullshit. It's like you're not James Bond. And if you do want to do like a James Bondy joke in that regard, do what Tim Cook did with like that video where they like replace like the iPad's chip with an M series chip, and Tim is like really happy about that, right? But like, you don't have that kind of charisma. You don't have that kind of like, even I would say like media understanding at those companies. Like, if you're HP, you probably don't care about making really good like impressions during Computex, right? These people don't understand that every impression counts. At least that's how I perceive it. It's not like I believe that HP or Dell or Lenovo, that they are all doomed because of that, but it's just like AMD was like talking non-stop about AI. Then Microsoft came in and talked more about AI. And then people came in and had like laptops to show you, but then they also only talked about AI. This is not conducive to a good presentation. It has like no ebb and flow. It just has like AI. Even though there is more here definitely to talk about. So for one, let me jump in here. For one, the higher end part here is the Ryzen AI 9 HX370. That is a 12 core, 24 threads part. It has 4 Zen 5 cores, as far as I understand, and 8 Zen 5C cores. Is that showing that? So while AMD's top chips in general, Ryzen AI, blah, 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 blah. Wait, where is that? Do they not have that here? Thank you, by the way, Anantech, for doing like a really thorough write-up on this. But sometimes it's weird that you don't put like very relevant information closer to like the top. It's only at 12, however, and all of the IPC gains, performance associated with jumping is a 10 core 20 thread with a 5 gigahertz boost. It utilizes the latest. What? Wait, you do not have like the specs lined up? Okay. Or am I missing this somewhere here, guys? I know the specs. Right, yes. So the Ryzen AI, no, I'm sorry, the AMD Ryzen trademark AI 9 HX370. This reminds me of one old joke. I just want to show it very briefly because it's so funny and so applicable. While I do this, guys, please subscribe, like, share, comment, do all the YouTube jazz, as I always say. Comment on the video to let me know what you like, what you don't like, and leave a super chat or a super sticker if you want to support this channel directly. Like, this is how I feel when you get to like...
Now, do you want to combine your love of camping...
When you get to like such ridiculous naming schemes? Yes.
...with your love of buying the wrong Porsche? Oh. No, because I have good news, okay? Because you can now buy, well, it's a new type of Boxster, okay? With a tent on the top of it. Here it is. Look at that roof. It looks like a tramp's hat.
What it is, it's called the Boxster Spider, and it's kind of a super lightweight version, so it only weighs 1,250 kilos, top speed 166 miles an hour, 0 to 64.8 seconds. And it's that fast because it's OPP.
Okay.
Let me just spell this out. It's really complicated. So let me just spell this out. It's a D.
By the way, this is a part of the German language. We call that zusammengesetzte Substantive, basically like combined subjects, is it called? It's basically like when you combine nouns. And this is how we get words that are super duper long and incredibly confusing to anybody in other languages.
DOPPELK.
DOPPEL, that stands for double.
UPPLUNG. SGET. RIE BE.
Can we get it on the screen? Get it.
That's a long word.
That is a. Do you know what that means? You speak German.
I do.
Well, no. What's the only German you can say?
Aber ja, natürlich, Hans ist nass, er steht unter dem Wasserfall.
What's that mean?
Naturally, Hans is wet, he's standing under water.
Okay, yeah, so it's a classic joke from Top Gear, back in the day when Top Gear was still Top Gear. And this is how I feel about saying AMD Ryzen AI HX370. So basically, it's Strix Point. It has 4 Zen 5 cores and 8 Zen 5C cores. As I explained, those Zen 5C cores they're not quite efficiency cores because they do still have features like simultaneous multi-threading, which is basically one core but 2 threads. So they are very, very similar to like the regular Zen 5, but as I said, they clock a little lower, and it's hard to say if they have really identical IPC because they do have they do have less cache. But since also some like cache is shared, it's really hard to say. And you also probably wouldn't want those cores to be like designated for like single threaded tasks. You would always want to give those to the regular Zen 5 cores. So this is how you basically get 12 cores, 24 threads. You get a maximum boost clock, which is pretty much your single core boost for 5.1 gigahertz. So that's still far off from the 5.7 gigahertz that you overall get. Then you have the base clock at 2 gigahertz, which also has a lot to do with you having like efficiency focused cores there. So, the default TDP is 28 watts, but you can configure it between 15 and 54 watts. This is a full monolithic die, right? There is no IO die. There is no difference between like 2 CCDs or whatever. This is completely based on TSMC's 4 nanometer. And yes, it has only one die. It has all the features like AVX2, AVX 512, and then all this combination of letters and numbers. And then when you look at its graphical capabilities, this is where we actually get a lot of improvement over the last generation. We do have a newer generation, as I said before, a 3. Which is RDNA 3.5, but we also have now 16 graphics cores versus previously those were 12. The frequency is quite nice and stuff like that. And then, of course, they do outline different TOPS ratings for this chip, which is 50 TOPS just for the NPU. But when it comes to the entire package with acceleration from CPU, but primarily from the GPU, you can get up to 80 TOPS. This is a number we haven't yet gotten from Apple. I assume this number will get very, very high from Apple, actually, because Apple has like for years optimized their CPUs with machine learning accelerators. They have beefy GPUs in comparison to their overall die size. So while like for example an M4 might still underperform like this one, when you actually look at basically like the default 28 watt TDP, right? The 28 watt TDP is not the TDP of the M4. That is a TDP that is much, much more comparable to the M3 Pro, right? Which is like 6+6 core design. It has like basically double the GPU cores of the base M series chips. It has like 50% more memory bandwidth. So this is not a competitor for the base M4. But sometimes we do have like comparison graphs like this. Now, it probably won't matter that much for this specific graph because an upcoming M4 Pro will still likely have the exact same NPU, but it just will also be able to use its additional CPU cores, its additional GPU cores to further gain an advantage, right? So let's see what AMD exactly advertises here. The only other thing to cover is that there will be a Ryzen AI 9 365 that is basically that, but with fewer GPU units, 2 fewer Zen 5C cores, and a slightly lower 5 gigahertz max clock speeds instead of 5.1. So nothing like game changing. It's similar to the changes that we saw when we like covered the difference between like the Snapdragon X Elite and the Snapdragon X Plus. They do talk about like different ways they accelerate AI. For example, they say like they have like block FP16, which gives you basically like the precision of int 8, but which gives you like the performance of int 8, but the precision of FP16. No idea if that's correct, but take it with a pinch of salt if you want to. We'll see how much that actually improves, because this still, like their tops count, is still at 8-bit. And I assume they would have also simply made that graph and said it's 8-bit, but also 16-bit, right? If it still had the same tops count, it could still mean that the maximum tops count does go down if you target FP16 rather than int8. So they do have actually some comparisons here between the Ryzen AI 9 HX370 versus the Snapdragon X Elite, which I don't know which X Elite version this exactly is. I hope it's the best one. We do have very interesting things here. Stuff like they do have Geekbench 6.3 test, which is plus 5%. Also, they do outline that you don't need emulation for their stuff, because obviously most of Windows and most of Windows apps is optimized for x86, but with basically Ryzen, but with the Snapdragon chips, you basically need to emulate it because those are ARM based, and you need to like translate, or not even emulate, but sometimes translate x86 code to ARM code. So there will be a performance penalty sometimes there, but again, it's hard to tell sometimes. Also, what I don't like is you give like a lot of percentages and like numbers like this, but we rarely get like a real number, right? You know what I mean? Like if, for example, we know that in Geekbench, and multi-threaded, the Snapdragon X Elite has like 14,000, right? Does that mean this is like 14,700, whatever, 14,070, or even some bullshit like that, right? Give me something. And because those percentages, those are nice, but with that, there's also always the question, well, which exact Qualcomm Snapdragon did you test? Like, even if you took like the highest end version of the Snapdragon X Elite, did you test it in a device that actually gives you like 80 watts of power, right? Maybe such a device simply doesn't exist or whatever. So it's always a little difficult. But they do say it's 5% faster in responsiveness, which is basically how they describe Geekbench, which is funny because everybody says that Geekbench is like Apple Bench and it's designed to give Apple like an advantage. And here's like AMD using, as I said before, like 2 different versions of Geekbench to calculate IPC for Zen 5. Here's them like categorizing it as a general responsiveness benchmark. It's quite funny. And then in Procyon Office, 10% faster. In multitasking, this is also misleading though. Like Cinebench is a multi-threaded workload, that is correct, but it does not mean that it's 100% indicative of what most people would describe as like multitasking performance. Arafat Zahan saying, what's up, man? All good. I'm trying to go through as much of like Zen 5, Ryzen AI, Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite stuff as I can, but I will probably continue a lot of this tomorrow once we also have like data from Intel's Meteor Lake. I also hope that at some point we get like a lot of new data when it comes to the actual Snapdragon X Elite, because as I've outlined numerous times at this point, we have had like 4 or 5 separate presentations of the X Elite and the X Plus at this point. That is not to count individual events like the introduction of Microsoft Surface products that have the Snapdragon X Elite. And we still don't have a fully comprehensive understanding of it. In fact, it feels like other companies that have like access to like basically like already designed products but not quite on the shelf products, they have better understanding of the Snapdragon X Elite than we do, even though we've gotten like presentation after presentation after presentation. So in what they describe as multitasking, or I would just say multi-threaded, it's 30% faster, but in graphics it's 60% faster. I would really believe that. because the Snapdragon X Elite actually has a pretty weak GPU for what it is. From the earliest test that we have seen, it was even losing out to like a fully enabled, like a 10 GPU core version of the M2 chip, and since then obviously the M3, the M4 have given us drastically better capabilities. Arafat, you're saying it's going to be an exciting year for CPU. That's for sure. Just got to wait for independent benchmark. Yes, exactly. And for AMD, it's not quite difficult, right? We do, for one, I do trust AMD in general more than I do Qualcomm, but that's neither here nor there. But they've also said that their chips are pretty much guaranteed in July. They've shown out a lot of laptops, right? And I know that if I wait 1 month, I get basically real devices, real benchmarks. While with Qualcomm, I know that probably the same thing is happening next month too. It's supposedly coming out like actually still this month. But because it's been like so long in the works, earlier in the video I've alluded to, basically it's like giving birth at this point. It's like close to 9 months. Even if you had like an early born child, it would at this point be fully survivable. But yeah, so this is why I just hate the media game that Qualcomm played with the X Elite. I don't think the X Elite by itself is terrible. But yeah, in graphics, it's not a very impressive thing. It's unfortunate that it's really hard to compare graphics when you are on different operating systems, and when you don't have like quite as many like comprehensive cross-platform benchmarks. Part of that is because the M4 right now doesn't even exist on macOS. It exists on iPadOS, and iPadOS does not share too much software with Windows when it comes to benchmarks. So yeah, unfortunately, it will probably take even beyond the official launch of the X Elite and the Ryzen AI chips before we know just how well they compare to M4. I don't need this anymore. What else? And this is them testing versus the current Meteor Lake processors. This is Intel Core Ultra 185H. You'll see that it wins basically in everything. That makes sense to me. Meteor Lake was never a great chip. It has like some interesting things, like it has like low power efficiency cores on its SoC die. It uses Intel 4 nanometer for its main CPU cores. So it can actually, in very well optimized use cases, have like pretty good like power consumption and stuff like that. And it's Intel, so its single threaded performance is not bad in general. But just if you try to look at it holistically, it just wasn't great, especially for how close it was coming out to this. And I mean, it's also close to getting replaced anyway with like Arrow Lake and Lunar Lake. I just wouldn't look honestly at Intel like at Meteor Lake based Intel chips if I was in the Windows laptop market right now. Since I'm not a great fan of Windows on ARM, right now I would just be looking at AMD chips and potentially waiting for Intel's latest chip. Ouch, 73% on Blender. Yeah, which is it's also difficult to still say, right? Because this has like Alchemist, which is Intel's first proper desktop generation GPU architecture. The upcoming Lunar Lake will be based on Battlemage, and Battlemage will have improvements to general performance, but also to ray tracing to rasterization ratios. So that advantage definitely won't be replicated with it versus Lunar Lake. However, it probably still is enough to beat Lunar Lake. The question with Lunar Lake will be like, how efficient is it going to be? If it's on a mix of TSMC 3 nanometer and Intel's own 20A node, it could actually be definitively more efficient than AMD's like 4 nanometer based processors. So this could be actually the first time in a while where Intel's chips are definitively more efficient than AMD's. Like you have some scenarios where Meteor Lake was more efficient than their 7040 and 8040 series chips, but those scenarios were kind of few and far in between. So overall, I would say that AMD definitely leads right now, and then basically tonight we'll see like if Intel can make up for that difference. And we see like other stuff here. This is normalized to 100% for the Intel Core Ultra chip. In gaming, it gives like 30% to around 50% more performance, which makes sense if you have a faster CPU, if you have a faster GPU, you can render games faster. It's not really a surprise. Then they have that whole collection of laptop chips, many of which were present at the event. So again, as you can see, there are not that many great comparisons right now to the M3 and the M4. Maybe Intel will actually surprise us and give us more results. One thing that I did find disappointing for the most part was the lack of gen-to-gen comparisons, especially if you are like on a 2-year cycle. I kind of think it's weird to not do gen-to-gen comparison. Apple sometimes will like compare like the M3, they primarily compared it versus M1 because well, at this point, M1 was 3 years old. Apple basically thought, well, nobody will be upgrading from M2 to M3. But if you are like in the Windows space, you kind of need to have like that gen-to-gen overview, even if you still believe that most people won't be upgrading from a 7000 or 8000 series to your AI chips. I still think we need those numbers. So, but at least we got some numbers for, oh, by the way, this is, I kind of missed that, where we have like the details for the HX 370 and the 365. But we did get some Snapdragon X Elite comparisons. But this was from the AMD perspective. And you know, there are always two truths to one story. Not really, but there are always different perspectives. And this is when we get to Qualcomm's presentation. Now, Qualcomm's presentation I did not watch because why would I at this point? And there isn't actually that great of a write-up about it, which was fascinating to me. But we do have a lot of images. I did store some data on the top of my head, and we are basically getting some early comparisons, not even maybe as much with Apple as we do now with AMD's chips. And then tomorrow, I assume that Intel will basically strike back at all those guys and say like, oh, but maybe except for like TOPS count, we are actually better in every way than like your competitors because we have like the latest node and whatever. So let's see. So for one, the marketing, right? They call it the PC Reborn. And there's a lot of excitement about like Windows on ARM or just in general ARM-based PCs. I do not quite honestly get that, not because I'm not excited for ARM in general, like for example, and this will be probably worth like covering at some point, ARM X925. Right, so they like ARM itself introduced like a reference design for like their latest core, and instead of calling it the X5, which we all kind of thought it would be, they introduced the X925 core. And what is kind of hilarious about it is that from everything they've said, it is probably better than the Orion cores in the Snapdragon X Elite and what will be powering the Snapdragon 8 Gen 4. It would be kind of sad if like Qualcomm bought up Nuvia and invested so much into their latest architecture only for the reference design from ARM to come out and be better and also integrate like all the new stuff from like ARM v9.2 and shit like that. So, but yeah, they have like a 10Y decode here and things like that. It's a very, very impressive core. I assume it's going to be very big, even though it's optimized for like TSMC 3 nanometer. And they did say it's like 17-18% better, like basically like power, like when equalized for power consumption. So it's definitely more efficient. And probably if you push it even higher, like it can get you like 25-30% improvements over the old X4 core. So that's actually, or the current X4 core. Now I wouldn't expect anything with the X95 core, given that the next Snapdragon chip that will be still introduced this year will be an Orion core, but I suppose that we'll see more chips from like Android vendors like MediaTek primarily introduce that on in early 2025. Samsung is also likely going to be using that in the Exynos 2500 unless they finally introduce a new architecture. But yeah, for now, this definitely would have been like top candidate for the Snapdragon 8 Gen 4 if Qualcomm hadn't like pre-announced basically like them fully switching to their Orion core. So I just wanted to say, like, there's a lot of exciting shit happening in the ARM world. I just dislike it when people like project like general positive trends and try to hyper focus on stuff. Like when they say like, oh, ARM is good, that means ARM is better than x86. ARM is efficient. Oh, that means ARM can actually scale and get better and x86 is doomed and whatever. No, that was never the case. I know that some channels, including some very pro-Apple channels, have said that in the past, but x86 still has a future. Maybe it will have hard limits versus ARM, but we definitely don't seem to be there yet. And it seems like a lot of the ARM stuff right now is basically like interchangeable with some of the stuff we see from the x86 competitors. We see a lot of talk about like Copilot plus PCs, like basically AI acceleration. We see a lot of focus on dedicated media engines so that we can improve stuff like video playback times. It's not like a groundbreaking revolution. The M1 was great for a couple of reasons. For one, Apple wasn't even using the latest like Intel chips at that point, so that was like a 2-3 generational jump. Then even if you compare it to the latest Intel chips, which was like 14 to 10 nanometer at that point, depending on which part of the year you want to look at. Now you're looking at a 5 nanometer TSMC part. So you have like 2 to 2.5x node jumps. And then you have Apple's ongoing expertise when it comes to designing ARM chips, right? They didn't just drop out of the tree and create an ARM chip because ARM is so inherently better than x86. Apple has been building ARM chips at that point for decades, right? And this to me is why it's so confusing when people are saying, well, Qualcomm is entering the ring. That means it's automatically going to defeat. Like, let's forget Apple, which is on ARM and on a newer node and things like that. But it's automatically going to defeat Intel and AMD. Why should it? It's not like Intel and AMD are in the same spot as Intel was versus Apple and TM1 back in 2020. So, but primarily they do talk about all the goodies, like that their stuff will also have like Wi-Fi 7 and good media encoders, AI accelerators. So it all makes sense. They're trying to sell you on a platform. Arafat saying always needs to keep an open mind. x86 is not efficient because it can still do a lot of things that ARM can't do straight up. The limit is physics. Exactly. It's not like one thing is so much inherently better than the other. If we like at one point, I remember there being like a quote in the industry that said like, Intel feels like it was given like a CPU design by aliens, right? It was so far ahead of everything else, but they wouldn't do anything else, right? They wouldn't like build like competitive GPUs or whatever, right? So Intel was like super far ahead in terms of CPU business, but it's not like they ended up creating displays, speakers, their own laptops or whatever. They just kept on making CPUs, and then to a degree like Wi-Fi modules and stuff like that. And then they had like experiments with like their like SSD competitor, which unfortunately they pretty much killed. And so Intel was super far ahead with x86, and Apple was super far ahead with ARM. That does not say that one is like inherently better than the other. Multiple days of battery life is like a promise. Again, I will not be covering battery life stuff here because it very much depends on the actual product. It will fluctuate even like with the exact firmware that it has running. So I will wait until we have like real devices. They're all running like the latest version of Windows on ARM and things like that. So a lot of AI talk. Satya Nadella even tuned into the stream. If you see devices that look like that, this is usually when we have reference products. So they do have 45 tops. That compares to what AMD says is 50 tops for them. Upcoming Lunar Lake, 40 to 45 tops, and Apple's 38 tops on the M4. Now, what is interesting, they did make like a power consumption graph here. It's very misleading, and because of course it is. It's basically like not like a performance comparison, but it's a performance per watt comparison for AI. And what's fascinating about it, they say it's 2.6 times more efficient than the M3 and 5.4 times more efficient than the Intel Core Ultra 7. Now, the problem with Apple is you cannot actually fully isolate the neural engine. With how Core ML works, you can target the neural engine more specifically, but some tasks, like some parts of the AI task, will be handed over to the CPU or partially to the GPU if Apple believes that this is where they should be. It helps you, for example, can make the process much less efficient, but for a moment it gives you like a lot more performance, right? We've talked about the difference between like 50 tops of NPU performance on the latest Ryzen AI chips, but 80 tops of overall like system tops. So what like we don't actually know how much more power you potentially got for like a specific task, if the task was in any way built in mind with Core ML. It's like Procyon AI score. It's like, again, AI benchmarking is very much in its infancy. The one truly like cross-platform test that we have gotten thus far is like Geekbench ML, and it's not very good like on Apple devices right now, not because of performance or whatever, but because it's really hard to like isolate the neural engine from everything that we have seen right now with how Core ML, Apple's AI API works. So those numbers, I would take them with a pinch of salt, and it's also basically this is the M3 chip, an 8-month-old processor at this point, versus a chip that hasn't even launched yet. And M4 doubles the AI performance, and it is much more efficient than the M3. So, but I doubt that in this test and how it's run and how it's calculated, I doubt that even the M4 would be the X Elite. I think this is a test that with how Qualcomm set it up, it just very much benefits them. They outlined that their chip is more efficient and therefore also gives you lower thermals and better battery life than Intel's Meteor Lake processors. I don't doubt that because for one, it's like Meteor Lake, as I said before, it's not like the best chip right now, and this is a new one, and it will be competing against Lunar Lake more than Meteor Lake, so it better be. But they did say this is NPU usage, and I have no idea what workload for regular people will require 1 hour of continuous NPU usage. But this is Qualcomm. They love that funny shit. But yeah, say 5 times higher performance at even lower thermals. Yeah, so a lot of stuff. Then they talked more about like their integration with Microsoft and basically bringing Windows on ARM, on bringing like AI acceleration. They do call themselves now the new performance leader for Windows. This is versus the 7940HS, so this is not even against like the 8940HS, unfortunately. This is against Meteor Lake, older chips. So yes, this is not against the latest AMD chips, not the latest Intel chips. So it's basically meaningless. I just really wanted to show you that whenever companies show that stuff, they love taking the last generation. What do they compare here? So they do bring up stuff like superior NPU performance. Wait, is this versus Apple? This was single thread performance. Then an undisclosed competitor. Yeah, this is against Apple. Of course, because yes, if they say 28% faster in multi-threaded tasks, that sort of lines up with like what the M3 Geekbench 6 Mac benchmarks, multi-core, the base M3. It's around 11,700. Let's even say it's 11,500 versus like 14,500 on the Snapdragon X Elite. This is so stupid. Yes, it beats out the M3 and probably even the M4, which would be around here in multi-threaded performance. Can you guess why? Yes, because those are chips designed on 4 performance cores versus the Snapdragon X Elite is built out of 12 exclusively performance cores. Its actual competitor out of Apple's current chips would be the 6+6 design M3 Pro, which delivers its 12 CPU cores that's here, around 14,200 result at less than 30 watts. From everything that we have seen, and I've seen even people like Vadim Yurev share like screenshots of that presentation, in order to reach its actual like maximum multi-threaded performance, it seems like it will need like 40 watts, 45 watts on the Snapdragon X Elite. So there's no comparison which one is more efficient right now. But yeah, it's funny. It's also like just to give you certain like 35% more memory bandwidth. That's because the Snapdragon X Elite and the base M3 have the same bus width, right? Which, given that it uses faster memory, which is 8533 megatransfers per second versus Apple's 6400, yes, that gives you 35%. Now the M4 already would lower that gap to like 12% or something because it has 20% more bandwidth than the M3 by itself. But as I said, this is not actually a competitor to the M3 or the M4. It's a competitor to this. Not this. Where's the M3 Pro? Here. It's a comparison to this, the M3 Pro, and that one has 150 gigabits per second, not 130 gigabytes per second, not 135. This is bullshit. Those are not numbers. The better battery life. Like, what does that mean? Better battery life. That's not how it works. Like you're comparing probably the MacBook Air, right? Like you cannot just take a device, right, and then compare it against another device. You have to like equalize it for power consumption. It's so weird. Well, what else? 2 times superior NPU performance, which would put it in line with the M4's performance. By the way, we have gotten some like Llama results, I believe, like for like that open source large language model, and supposedly the M4 handily beats out the Snapdragon X Elite. I don't want to take those numbers like and present them without proof, but this is what I've seen some people share online. So if you know if that's true or not, please feel free to share. I do trust you guys. I do not want to give you a complete overload of information. We've already been talking for well over an hour. But yeah, so those are their claims against the M3, not the M4, not which is like in a 5.1 millimeter iPad Pro, not the M3 Pro, not the M3 Max or whatever. It's against a chip that basically shouldn't be compared against. Arafat saying, wow, we thought AMD benchmark were sketchy. Here comes Qualcomm with their nonsense. Yeah, this is complete nonsense. Like it's like not even funny, right? Because when you look at their website, they should have like a tech spec stuff. I don't want a product brief, documentation. No. What? I just want the kind of specs list that I got from AMD. Overview. Let's see. All right. So here are the it's not 8533. I apologize. It's 8448 megatransfers per second. Basically 8500. And you have like the different versions of the Snapdragon chips right here. What is funny is they don't actually outline like a concrete TDP for those chips, right? You can basically take any one of those chips and put it into a TDP of your choice. Now, for the highest end version, you probably wouldn't want to put it in something that has like less than 28 watts or something like that, but you could put it into like an 18 watt design, and now your performance from here might instead perform more like here, right? Or even here. And this is why I'm trying to say, like, this idea that you can just compare the highest end Snapdragon versus the base M series chip is just ridiculous. And even here, by the way, do you notice that like on the 35% memory bandwidth, they've somehow forgot to mention GPU performance? They forgot to mention single core performance. That's all versus an 8-month-old already existing Apple processor. This is not even against M4, where all of those benefits would be either halved or be completely non-existent at that point. And as I said, that performance per watt for the NPU, that is the result of like a pretty garbage test. So then they outline stuff like designs here. By the way, then the next device they talked about is a 45 watt-hour TDP, 45 watts of TDP. And they do advertise like 18 hours of battery life, no 22 hours or something like that. So it's always like, yes, there is a maximum like hypothetical that you can have, but it's probably not going to be reached. And yes, if you then compare it to like stuff like battery life in terms of Meteor Lake, I absolutely will give them the advantage. I don't know. This is one thing that I do want to highlight because this is something, again, similar to the NPU results. I don't want to cover it before we actually have like real benchmarks. And that is stuff like video encoding and decoding in terms of not just video playback, right? Because those are pretty easy. But for encoding, for like video editing, for example, like we do have some tests where in some encode and decode tasks, like Apple wins, and some Intel wins by a lot, and some Qualcomm wins by a little. And all of those tests, to a degree, ignore that there is potential for different output quality. And I just want to know how good or bad is that output quality? Is there actually a significant difference before I cover more of that stuff? in the days when we only had Intel and AMD, it was kind of easy to measure those things. Now it's gotten much more complicated, especially with some stuff having to run through the emulation/translation layer on the Snapdragon X Elite. Right now, Apple's latest M series chip is not even in a Mac, it's in an iPad, which does limit what apps it actually has access to. So yeah, but for now, at least versus the existing Meteor Lake, it is more efficient. Yeah, and then you have stuff that advertises like 26 hours of video playback. It is really device dependent. I mean, you can really not like say that this is entirely due to one chip or whatever. Oh, by the way, Apple has already put like the WWDC keynote, like the live stream on YouTube. So if you want to sit there and wait for a full week for it to go online, you can. But like when you go to Mac and you go to like MacBook Pro, and you go to like tech specs, even before, or no, let's go with compare, right? So let's say we have on MacBook Air 13-inch with an M3, then we have a MacBook Pro 14-inch, and then let's compare it. Like let's just use completely similar like devices in like a similar form factor, right? 13 to 14 inches, not too different. And then when you actually look at battery life, right, we'll suddenly find that the MacBook Pro 14-inch with the base M series chip, well, that one goes to 22 hours instead of 18. So again, absolutely same chip, but different battery capacity, different screen technologies. Here you have a larger chip, so even though you will have the same encoders and decoders, simply because of the fact that you have a larger die that has to receive more power, Apple is rating this for lower battery life. And when you actually look at the MacBook Air 15-inch, which is weird because it has a larger battery capacity, and the same chip, so even a slightly larger screen shouldn't actually be eating that much extra watts, but apparently Apple rates them for the same 18 hours. So those tests really need to be like, in some ways, I would say we probably need to get rid of those tests because simple video playback test is just so stupid these days. I would say mixed usage is the best test you can have, and then this is where you will find those devices more in like the 10 to 12 hour range. And I think this is far, far more representative. And then, of course, you will have wild swings depending on how bright your screen actually is and things like that. So I just wanted to say that like whenever like based on a chip you make like claims about not efficiency, not like wattage consumption, but battery life, that to me is always weird because battery life is the result of an entire integrated product that has a battery, that has a firmware, screen, whatever. So I just really wanted to make that clear. Touch display, need to advertise that because Apple doesn't have it. What I find funny is I think the laptops shown here, especially like this Acer one, I honestly think they all are kind of bad. Not due to individual spec points, but like I think design wise they're all more simple than what we saw from AMD. Is it shown here? Oh no, that would be here. I'm sorry. Probably at the end, right? These devices look more attractive, don't they? And I mean, like the Snapdragon X Elite doesn't really make sense in like a gaming device, like a tough gaming or the ROG Zephyrus. But those are some of the most attractive, some of the most well-built Windows devices. And even like in a premium creator device where you probably would want to partner it up with a dedicated GPU, why go through the trouble of having to emulate and translate x86 applications if you want to run them on the GPU probably anyway? So at that point, just use AMD, just use Intel. And those devices are just simply missing. And that ZenBook S that I've seen for AMD is actually pretty attractive with like a 3K OLED screen. It looks pretty good, has like slim bezels. I haven't seen the Snapdragon devices actually be as attractive. I've seen, I know that there's some overlay where you basically get the same product, but with like slightly different, but with different processors. But in general, I would say the AMD laptops have been much more appealing to me than this. So yeah, we had like efficiency claims, AI performance claims. Again, suspiciously pretty much no single-threaded results or GPU results. Then we have them like announcing partnerships, which is like they are nowadays benefiting from Apple having been obviously on the ARM market for quite a while. Apps like DaVinci Resolve have had Apple Silicon optimized versions for quite a while, so that now they're getting that on Windows on ARM. I believe it has actually been on Windows on ARM for a while natively anyway, but now it's getting like AI capabilities. They also built like a development kit, basically like a Mac Mini competitor. You have like Dell PCs, which are all honestly quite a little bit boring. In terms of gaming, they basically try to advertise that it's Windows, right? This is their one advantage here over Apple, and they've tested like 1,200 plus games, saying that they work through their emulation, translation layers, or they might already be like native for Windows on ARM. So that's cool. It definitely will probably be better support than what Macs mostly have. Then you have like Lenovo devices, and basically like them listing all their partners. Oh yeah, and by the way, they hired that like Mac versus PC guy, the same guy that Intel hired not too long ago to like dunk on Apple. Now Qualcomm is hiring him. I don't even know if he has like any other work these days, but apparently this is getting him paid. So yeah, you see, not too many new claims. I think that this was probably that this was probably like the most aggressive stand that they took against Apple, because it does line up with them talking about M3, right? I don't think that, oh God, I hate that. I don't think that makes sense for that to be like any other competitor, but it's also funny that they do not mention Apple by name, like treating them like Voldemort or something. But take it as you will. I will not engage in some of that stupidity. I will wait until we actually have like more real world results. But I just really wanted to state that, like, yeah, their comparisons are not always fair, right? They definitely are not looking to compare versus M4. They definitely are not looking to compare against Strix Point. Now, don't get me wrong. I fully believe that if Strix Point had like come out way before this presentation, they would have kind of had to include Strix Point. But since they could get away with that, they didn't. And the same goes for Lunar Lake. Yeah, and when it comes to everything else, battery life definitely will be an improvement over current gen Windows devices, so that's cool. And for everything else, we are getting a lot of devices. We're getting like them pushing speedometer tests, which is funny because somehow we do not have a speedometer test from them versus Apple. Also, like, is speedometer 2.1 the latest speedometer version? No, we do already have Speedometer 3 from BrowserBench, which was like a cooperation between like Google and Mozilla and Apple and whatever. Like, why is it oh my God, this is the same bullshit as with the Cinebench test where everybody uses R23 because it looks better somehow than 2024 because Apple falls far less behind in 2024. Because R23 was basically no way optimized properly for ARM. Yeah, so I don't even know why this is Speedometer 2.1. I kind of automatically assume that any speedometer test that we are getting like mid-2024 would be Speedometer 3. But this just furthers the list of weird benchmarks provided by Qualcomm. yeah, I would say it's an interesting era of competition right now. For now, the biggest shortcoming, regardless of architecture, is that both AMD Strix Point and the X Elite are 4nm chips versus even the M3 having been already on 3nm for like 8 months versus M4 now coming on second generation 3nm. And of course, the fact that NPU benchmarks are kind of very difficult, especially in cross-platform fashion right now. TOPS do not scale one-to-one with real-world performance in AI tasks, but we do have a lot more data, and I do have, especially as we get those devices actually in the real world, that I will see like more GPU tests, which to me is very interesting, which we haven't gotten enough. At least we got some of them here, which is like from AMD, but obviously we then have to consider like the difference between like native ARM games on the running on the X Elite versus ones that have to be translated and emulated. So I really hope that people find like we find a great reviewer or 5 or 10 hopefully, and they all do those very comprehensive, very in-depth tests, and I'll be here to react to their videos and read out their articles, because this is my journalistic promise to you guys. So we have been streaming for now 1.5 hours. I probably will be streaming tomorrow, definitely. If not tomorrow, then on Wednesday, because I am going on a longer weekend trip for work stuff and for some family stuff. So I do hope you bear with me that there won't be that much pre-WWDC coverage, but then there definitely will be a lot of dub and post-dub coverage. But I will keep you posted here and on Twitter. I do love interacting with you guys, as you can see. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I didn't make it too controversial. This was primarily like a fact-finding video in many ways. This was not to make definitive statements who actually wins, because for one, we are lacking the actual devices. We might also need probably like some new versions of firmware and Windows and games and apps before we can actually make more definitive statements, even once the devices are out. So this will be a longer process for all of us, and I'm not just saying that so you keep tuning in to more live streams. But I hope I kept you entertained. I hope I got you somewhat informed. This was also definitely informative for me, because it was a good chance to like review all the data that I sort of missed while watching like the AMD presentation yesterday and while briefly skimming the info on the Snapdragon announcements. So as always, I do encourage you to subscribe to the channel. It helps out tremendously, and of course it grows our community, which you guys know I absolutely love doing. Please hit the notification bell so you actually know when I go live next, which is very important for a live stream channel, believe me. Hit the thumbs up, like the video so the algorithm knows that you actually enjoyed it. Comment on the video, comment on my videos live, let me know in the live chat what you agree with, what you disagree with, what content suggestions you have for me. But of course, once the video has been uploaded, please feel free to comment on that as well. Helps with the algorithm. You can also make suggestions, stuff like that. Share the video to family and friends who you think will enjoy that content, or hell, who will give that content a small like. If you catch me live, you can support the channel directly financially with a small donation via super chat or super sticker. And if you feel like supporting this channel directly in the long term, you can subscribe to my Patreon. Link is in the description of this channel. Thank you so much. This was a long one, but a good one, and also not too long, which is good because I didn't yet start losing my voice, as I sometimes do after 2 hours. Yeah, I will look tomorrow or the day after that into Intel's announcements. There's also a lot of like stuff coming out about like the iPhone 16 right now. Like it's supposedly having the thinnest bezels ever, more leaks leading up to dub and stuff like that. So I will have a lot to cover in the future, and you can let me know what you would like to see me cover next. But until then, thank you again so much. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.